Okay, we are live.
Okay, great. It is 9:31 and I am going to call this meeting of the Climate Change Commission to order. Wynn, would you please take roll?
Yes. Chair Keener.
Present.
Vice Chair Allegado.
Present.
Commissioner Maynard.
Here.
Commissioner Kaufman.
Here.
Commissioner Fletcher.
Present.
We have 5 out of 5 commissions. We have quorum.
Thank you, Wynn. So the first item after roll call on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the August 20th, 2020 meeting. Does anyone have edits to the minutes?
What you say, Mom? Yeah.
Did everyone have a chance to look them over this morning?
3:30 after everybody's done with school. I'm gonna try and get Abby out of her house.
And please make sure you're on mute in the audience if you're not speaking. So there are no edits to the minutes? If there are not any edits, sorry, was there something?
Was just a comment still left, Vicky, that probably needed to be addressed. Other than that, it was just saying, putting the whole name of the interdepartmental working group. It just right now has the acronym, but there's a comment flagging that. So I think as long as that's addressed.
Okay. So we will expand that acronym. And other than that, can I get a motion to approve these minutes?
Motion to approve.
Second.
And it looks like the minutes have passed. Layla, we can make sure and update that acronym. Next on the agenda is the report on activities of the Office of Climate Change, Sustainability and Resiliency, I assume from Director Stambro.
Thanks, Chair Keener. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. So Josh Stambro, Chief Resilience Officer with the City and County of Honolulu for the record. As you guys well know, the climate situation and your work more dire and more relevant than ever, whether fires in California, and now we've got a fire on the Big Island in Ka'u that's spreading. NOAA ran out of alphabet letters for the storms in the Atlantic Basin for the second time in its history. And then I know thanks to some of the good work of folks on this call, the study on the front page of the paper today about 40% of our beaches being threatened with the loss. If we don't turn things around on climate and continue to motivate the office. We've also been continued to be engaged on the COVID response. I think I've given you a quick briefing around some of our work around our work to increase testing capacity, wastewater monitoring for COVID, been working to secure partnerships for increasing contact tracing in what has become a newly revitalized partnership with Department of Health. The last couple of weeks, it's certainly gotten better. We've also helped work to not only sort of lay the groundwork, but also lent staff to the new Office of Economic Revitalization, which is now being run by Director Amy Asselby, which is it's basically helping deploy CARES money for assistance with current folks in the economy, and then looking to ways to pivot the economy in a post-COVID climate. And our office has also been asked to help track the CARES funding expenditure and make it public. So there's now a public dashboard that our office developed on oneoahu.org, where you can go at any time. It's updated weekly to see where dollars have been allocated, contracted, and spent and the percentage of each dollar value is each category as we but we're basically in a foot race to spend CARES money and assist before the end of the year. In terms of the day job at the office, aside from all the COVID duties that we've been asked to do, there've really been three key pieces of climate policy put forward by the administration in 2020. Bill 25, which was the update to the energy codes. The Resilience Office worked in partnership with the Department of Planning and Permitting on helping update energy codes and future-proof buildings. That was passed earlier in the year. Bill 2, which was focused on an update to the land use ordinance and policy and parking policy, was a bill that designed and driven from Department of Planning and Permitting. That's currently has stalled. It was moving and is now been held up. And then Bill 65, which is mostly the coming out of the Resilience Office, is really and I'm not sure if the commissioners have been able to look at that, but it really is a codification of the roles and responsibilities of the Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency as we were stood up and started in 2017. Now trying to clarify and make sure that the responsibilities of the office are delineated alongside the other departments within the city. It's basically an internal bill to have the city lead by example in a few areas on climate, but also sort of delineate the responsibilities of the office. That is currently in the budget committee at council. A quick update on climate litigation. As you know, the city and county of Honolulu sued a couple dozen of the biggest oil and fossil fuel manufacturers and sales. There have been positive rulings in the Ninth Circuit with some of our sister cities. Just recently, 2 more states filed. I believe it was Delaware and Connecticut. So there's a little bit of momentum shift in the climate litigation piece, including just maybe 3 weeks ago, Judge Derek Watson, the federal judge here, lifted the stay on our case, and so that will now be going to be briefed around whether it should remain in state court or be removed to federal court. Obviously, the defendants, the large oil companies, would like it to have it in federal court, and we would rather have it here adjudicated by local law, where the impacts are greatest, where the misrepresentation occurred. We are also working on a climate action plan that we've briefed you on before. Right now, this was in response to the county council, and also a part of the mandate to stay in the Paris Climate Agreement is to have a climate action plan for our island. As you know, we've been for over a year out done community engagement. We do expect the draft of the climate action plan in the next few weeks to be made available again to the public for comment and review. The climate action plan is completely focused on how do we try to put the brakes on more climate damage, obviously, by how do we reduce carbon pollution on our island. The climate adaptation strategy is another effort coming out of the office, being led by our coastal and water team, and that the design is happening now. The contractor has been engaged, and that'll be about a 12-month process. So we're sort of getting towards the end of our climate action plan to produce that and comply with the Paris Climate Agreement. We are now just starting on the climate adaptation strategy to make sure that we can protect life, safety, property, given the impacts that we know are already loaded in the system and are going to occur regardless of the amount of mitigation in the climate action plan. And then finally, we're working really hard on a fleet transition project, internal again to the city, along with Mayor Caldwell's commitment to move towards renewable sources of energy for as much fleet as possible by 2035. We do have a contractor selected, and so that contractor is meeting with the different departments of the city to determine what types and the specs on vehicles and which ones can be converted sooner rather than later away from fossil fuels. Again, this is another example where the city is hoping to lead by example, and we should have 3 electric buses by the end of the year. So we're building the infrastructure for the buses right now so that they could be charged rather than having electric buses that don't have something to plug into. So we got to do first things first. So that's what the office has been working on, and happy to answer any questions. Mahalo.
Thank you for that update, Director Stambro. Are there any questions from the commission? Chip?
Yeah. Thanks, Josh. As usual, you guys dancing faster than anybody else on the dance floor. Can you explain the argument that led to the stay in the climate litigation?
I will try my level best as a someone who went to law school but ran away as fast as I could and not practiced in the field. So essentially what happened is when we put in our suit with state court here, the defendants, so the large oil companies, asked for it to be immediately be removed to federal court, citing that there's federal ties here, that it's not just a state issue. That's been the pattern and practice across all of the different lawsuits that have been filed. I think Honolulu is one of now, 16 or 17 different local municipalities that have filed suit. And in all those cases, the immediate response was to remove it from state court and try to get it to federal court by the defendants. So they did the same with ours. Because there's other municipalities that have filed suit before us, some of those arguments have been further up the chain. They've actually reached appeals courts in the federal court system. And in almost all of those cases, all but one, I think the appeals court basically ruled the proper place for this case to be heard is in state court. And that was a decision also reached by the Ninth Circuit, which is one circuit that we fall under. In Baltimore, which is another circuit, they've already been returned to state court and actually started the proceedings there. So we're actually not ahead of many of these other jurisdictions. It's just that the federal judge here, once that judge saw what the other appeals courts higher up than this district court here were doing, he basically said, there's no reason to keep waiting on this. This is being decided in other jurisdictions, and therefore I'm going to lift the stay and go ahead and have that argument here in court, whether it should be in state or federal court. So that's likely to be briefed here in front of Judge Watson in October, November this fall.
Thank you. Considering how many parties are doing the same thing, you said 15 or 16, is a class action suit appropriate? Has that been tried previously? Is that a more powerful approach?
I know that in our case, we thought that the harms to our island are particular and large enough that the idea of doing a class action, which would link a bunch of folks together. I mean, it's climate change manifests, and the impacts and the damages manifest very differently for different jurisdictions. Unfortunately, here for us, we're going to taste a huge range of those. It's not just focused on drought. It's not just focused on hurricanes. It's not just focused on sea level rise. You know, folks in Colorado have a very different range of damages and expenditures that they're going to have to put the bill on from the public coffers than we do. So I think the idea was to keep each jurisdiction you know, focused on the localized misrepresentations and the localized damages.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the commission?
I have a question, Vicky.
ahead.
John, can you talk a little bit about the decision to bring the One Water framework into Bill 65, and what do you think that means in terms of, you know, as you said, Bill 65 is sort of codifying what, you know, the office's activities. Can you talk a little bit about how you see the office playing sort of the role within the One Water planning framework? Like, will the office be running the interdepartmental sort of, you know, quote unquote checklist?
Yeah, happy to. So I know that the commission had backed a One Water approach in an earlier meeting. This is an effort not unlike Complete Streets, where multiple departments need to make infrastructure decisions at the same time. So to have a sort of cohesive approach and leverage each department's spend so that there's not a waste of government resources when you are looking to approach a similar space and work in it at the same time, whether it's wastewater or freshwater or stormwater. You know, those three prime departments, Department of Facility Maintenance, Department of Environmental Services, and Board of Water Supply need to be sort of on the same page especially when we think about rising sea level and then trying to raise infrastructure to counteract that. So if we're going to raise a road, obviously all three of those departments are going to be working at the same time in that space. I think One Water was based on the successful model around Complete Streets, where multiple agencies work at the same time to sort of redevelop and co-design that. They found that they needed a coordinating entity or a coordinating point person to do that, to do the Complete Streets, that it wasn't really possible for the departments to just sort of do it on their own or have one take the lead. And so in conversations with the departments, the idea is, and then you'll see it in Bill 65, is to have the coordination of the One Water sort of stakeholder group or those departments be run from the resilience office. So we would have dedicated you know, resources and time here to help convene that group and to help, because so much of it will be focused on climate adaptation. It seemed like a natural fit, and we were happy to help the department out with that. Should the bill pass. So that's, you know, the caveat here is that One Water, this climate adaptation approach, one piece of which is this One Water approach. There's going to be many, right? You're going to have these sort of shared approaches for coastal restoration. You're going to have shared approaches for disaster response. But for this one, this early one, the idea was to have it as part of the Kuleana of the resilience office.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions from the commissioners? No, with that being said, are there any questions from about this agenda item from the public?
Yeah, some comments. First, real happy to see that we're moving ahead with the adaptation element in addition to mitigation. And
Mr. Rainey,
I'm really,
could you please state your name and affiliation
sorry.
just for the record first? No problem.
Sure, sorry. Dave Rainey, Sierra Club. And I'm particularly interested in sort of the high priority, like Hauula, you know, where they're already getting king tide impacts, and how you're going to get the community input. I've talked with Layla a little bit about that to look at the equity issues involved and whether we should be considering another lower level of detail in the sustainable development planning, like special design districts or something that was suggested in the discussion of the East Honolulu sustainable development. In other words, a little more formalized way of making sure that you get the community input and coordinate the different steps that are going to have to be taken, within a sub-region. Yeah, basically those questions.
Thanks, Dave. I think so. There's several questions in there. I think the first one is, we often point to Hauula and the area over there with the highway. Just want to remind everybody that, the jurisdictional differences. So the city and county of Honolulu has certain pieces of infrastructure and roads. That's not one of them. That is a state road. We do want to work hand in glove if we can with Ed Sniffen and the Department of Transportation to have a shared response and sort of a vision of how we can thread the needle and figure out how to respond to some of these emerging climate adaptation issues together. But the climate adaptation strategy that we're putting together will really be focused on city infrastructure, and then the island to the extent that that it can dovetail with what the state is thinking in terms of their infrastructure issues. In terms of the equity question, we obviously look to the commission. I know that the commission is doing some work around recommendations around how to address equity within climate change issues on island. We're looking forward to that sort of as a guiding document to help guide some of our efforts. As you know, the Resilience Office, I think, we recognize that equity is it's a huge issue in climate. I mean, the folks who produce the least amount of carbon pollution are often the most impacted. And this is, on our island, at state level, at national level, and at an international level. It's just it really it's tough when you look at the numbers and what folks are going to be experiencing. You're seeing it right now. I mean, another storm heading to Louisiana, and some of the poorest folks have not even got recovered in terms of having power back to their house from the last one. But that in mind, we did go out and find private foundation support to start up an equity program within our office. And Lala Nuss, who's been working on that over the past year, has started our efforts around equity and inclusion, and making sure that everybody's voice is at the table. Not just the folks that can sort of afford to be there during the planning discussions. And so we have been trying to make sure that we are working with different communities. And when you mentioned the Hauula area, we've been working really closely with Dottie out there to talk about the resilience hub concept, because it is a very vulnerable piece of the coastline.
Thanks, Josh. I saw another hand. Mr. Arakawa?
Hi, good morning, everybody, and good morning, Josh.
Morning, Dave.
I'm coming from the I guess approach that we were included on the Complete Streets Working Group. LERF was statewide, and also AARP. So we're going to be asking that any work, and you compared this, you said it's not unlike the Complete Streets program. And so we would urge and we would request that the working group, that OCCSR create a working group that includes a broad working group, just like DOT did for Complete Streets. And so that's number one. And I have about 4 questions, but that's number one. Number two is Complete Streets included state and county highways. So they did not exclude the Hauula or the North Shore community because they were state highways. They included everyone. So we don't believe that OCCSR's position to exclude state highways, because state highways connect with county highways, right? You know, county streets. So we think that an overall approach would be better. If you folks just want to concentrate on just city streets, then, you know, maybe we got to go to the state and ask for a broader review. With respect to the group that you're working with, again, we talked about LERF and other affected stakeholders, including AARP, affected equity influenced affected populations were included in the Complete Streets program. So we would strongly urge the inclusion, a broad inclusion, and especially affordable housing, right? When you talk about equity, some of the work that has been done by your office has an impact on increasing upfront costs for affordable housing. So we believe the housing, I guess, you know, experts or people who build affordable housing should be included. And the last issue is, I think the question started with explaining one water concept in Bill 65. And I'm not sure, but we would appreciate input, or we appreciate outreach by OCCSR to the construction industry and the building industry, the tourism industry, ag industry on Bill 65. To my knowledge, it came as a surprise to all these organizations. We were never brought into it or, you know, had any talk story with you folks prior to Bill 65. We never saw Bill 65 until it was introduced. I may be wrong, but that's the thing. And this is all going forward. So we're looking forward to going forward and working with you folks on issues like One Water, Bill 65, you know, and equity issues, and including the affected stakeholders. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. I think there's I guess there's a couple questions in there that I can, you know, we look forward to working with anybody and everybody. We've always been open. We've always made sure with Bill 25 that we had almost 6-8 months of engagement, asking people to show up to meetings, targeted invitations, working with folks. I think we didn't handle Bill 2, but I know that DPP did a similar experience there, making sure to invite stakeholders to the table. Complete Streets is a little different. I believe Complete Streets was a law that was passed at the state level. And so that's where the state DOT inclusion came from. Unfortunately, we don't have state, you know, there's no state leadership, particularly around climate adaptation, comprehensive strategies. There were a couple of bills that have failed in the past, so we're trying to address this on the ground. We would love to work with the state, obviously, at any time. But because Complete Streets came as a top-down one, we're now forced to sort of start at a smaller jurisdiction and then and hope there's an opportunity to do that. I think the climate adaptation strategy, absolutely, we're going to be starting up outreach on that. Happy to work with AARP and LERF and anyone and everyone else on that. Bill 65 is primarily an internal bill to the city, internal city practices, internal city policies, internal city planning on how to address climate change from within the city, and then lead by example within the city. This is something we had heard from industry when we went out to talk about energy benchmarking, for example. We don't want a bill that would impact us. Why doesn't the city lead on it? And so that's in part what Bill 65 is doing, is laying out the different places where the city internally can address some climate issues and lead by example without much of any impact to the external parties. Thanks.
You know, Josh, we'll note in Bill 25, you mentioned Bill 25, when Councilmember Minor asked us to meet and we had meetings. We have a number of people that may be on this call that were at the meeting where you told us you're not here to negotiate, that you're not here to help low-income people or housing developers to put in EV charging or solar, hot water, solar hot water heaters. You're just here because Chair Menor told you to meet with the stakeholders. So I'm encouraged that the approach has changed for OCCSR, and we look forward to working with you. And we note that even though Bill 65 is primarily internal, it has a major effect on the stakeholders, all the industries in Hawaii and the stakeholders, because those those departments must work with the various industries and the various stakeholders. And the city is facing, I thought I heard, a $450,000 deficit for the rail and lower TAT and lower GET, state GET coming to the city. So the financial situation of the city is going to hit hard on the departments, which will hit hard on all of us stakeholders, housing and the low communities and the seniors also. So we look forward to working with you on Bill 65. Thank you.
Thanks, David. I think we have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow, so that's in the works. I want to push back. That's patently untrue what you characterized our meetings around Bill 25. And in fact, if you want to go back and look at our efforts to work with Hawaii Energy to provide grants for EV charging infrastructure for affordable housing, we absolutely built a bridge there in that community. So thanks as always for your feedback and concern. We'll continue to work together.
Thanks, Josh, and thanks, Mr. Arakawa. Are there other comments from the public before we move on to the next agenda item? Okay, I don't think I see anything. The next agenda item is communications and correspondence from the public. Ms. Vong, am I correct that there were no written communications or correspondence from the public on this agenda?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. So item number 6 is the discussion and adoption of the Climate Change Commission annual report for 2019 to 2020. This report is mandated to be done by the commission to summarize to the mayor and the city what was accomplished and recommendations for going forward into the next year. So we have the draft up, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. But first, I'll ask the commissioners if they have comments. Oh, sorry, I think I just stopped. I shared the wrong thing. What are you guys seeing right now?
The annual report.
Okay, you're seeing the annual report?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Commissioners, did you have a chance? I know I got some feedback on this and Layla has been putting it together. Were there other comments and changes requested to the annual report? So it starts with a summary of the meetings that were held during the time period, the activities that were pursued, the guidance documents that were released, including the climate change and financial risk paper, the memo to support the One Water framework, and legislative testimony that was provided during the time period. We also ended with several recommendations about the shoreline setback guidance being incorporated into city processes, the guidance on climate change and financial risk being incorporated into city processes, and the implementation of the One Water framework, some of which we would begin to see in Bill 65. Are there any comments from the commission? Or would you like me to scroll back anywhere?
If I may say something, it was fun to look at this, and it's been an incredibly busy year. And given that we are supposed to meet a minimum of twice a year, I think we were overly in a positive way active, and we have a lot accomplished. And I want to say I am really proud to be a part of that. So thank you.
Thank you, Bettina. I guess we met, was it 7 times? 7 times during the last time period, which is July 1st, 2019 to June 30th, 2020. And I'd say it's as low as 7 because of the pandemic at the beginning of the year, preventing us from meeting more until we got all of our ducks back in order. With that, are there any other comments from other commissioners, or would you like me to scroll anywhere else throughout the document? See McKenna shaking her head no. Rosie, anything?
I just noticed super minor formatting on the second page where on the third page. This is super minor, where like you see how 1 and 2 are a little bit more indented than the subsequent points. That was it. That was the only thing that I noted. But I agree with Bettina that we've been extremely active. Looking this over reminds me of, I remember one of the climate commission meetings that was like right before Christmas, where we were like, pass it. It was either before Christmas or before the new year, and we were like, pass this. Okay, it's done. But yeah, it's been a pleasure to work with everybody on the commission.
Chip?
No comments. I enjoyed reading it. I provided edits at the time, and I'm very happy with it.
Great. So with that, one minor formatting change. When is this something that we need to vote on to adopt, since it'll be sent on?
Yes.
Okay, so
Can
can I?
do it later, but there's actually still a format. C needs to be pulled under, but that can happen later, I think.
Sorry, can you say that again, McKenna? Which formatting?
Third page.
Can you pull A and C over?
Number
Oh.
There you go.
Got it.
We-
Oh, shoot. All right. So can I get a motion to adopt the 2019-2020 annual report?
Motion to adopt the 2019-2020 annual report.
Second.
Yes. And those in favor of approving the report, say aye.
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 So that
Aye.
was 5 ayes and no nays. So we have taken action and approved the annual report. And thank you so much to everyone for your input, and to Layla for really putting this together. Okay. So the next thing on the agenda is really where the meat of it is today. And it's the discussion on the status of the climate change and construction industry guidance document led by Bettina. So Chairperson Menert, would you like to share your screen and give the commission an update on a summary of the guidance document?
I would love to. I do want to say that it's been such a pleasure working on this. And before I go into the meat of it, I do want to acknowledge Chip Fletcher, who right at the beginning said he would be happy to review, guide, provide feedback, and he has done that. So thank you very much, Fletcher. Chip, any progress here is thanks to you as well. Okie dokie. I will now attempt to share my screen. How does that look? Not quite right, does it? There, better. Is it there?
That's good. Mhm.
Okay, perfect. So the paper, and I suspect most of you have at least given it a cursory review. It was posted a week ago. Is large, and any kind of summary that I am now attempting to give will not do it justice. The intent of this paper is really somewhat visionary. It gives a big picture. It is focused on opportunities, while at the same time outlining a very critical need for action. It then intends to leave the reader with a general direction moving forward. One question that I have at the beginning is I'd like your feedback on whether the scope might be too broad. This paper is not just looking at the construction industry itself, but at the built environment. One could argue that this could be two separate papers. So I look forward to feedback on that. On the introduction, let me forward this here. There, okay, here's the outline. Everything has to have a good outline. The construction industry generates nearly 40% of the annual global gas emissions. And global building stock is expected to double by 2060. This is what this graphic here tries to illustrate. That is about 2.5 trillion square feet in addition to the current building stock. And if you're kind of struggling with how much that truly is, it is the equivalent of adding an entire New York City every month for 40 years. This is a bit advanced. It is important to recognize the role of the built environment here. Our business as usual sits within a negative feedback loop. And as our planet is getting warmer, you heard Josh very eloquently speaking about the current situation. And the weather is getting more irregular. There's a greater need for increased cooling and heating during respective seasons. This increased energy use fueled by so many communities, by fossil fuels and natural gas is adding to the amount of carbon emissions in the atmosphere. So energy required is for many basic conveniences has a high cost. Energy costs in Hawaii are naturally higher than other places in the United States because a lot of our energy comes from burning fossil fuel, which must be imported. Petroleum-based energy increases environmental pollution. Here is where two types of carbons come in. One is embodied carbon, and the other is operational carbon. And together they contribute to the built environment's share of the earlier mentioned greenhouse gas emissions. Embodied carbon in the built environment, at least, comes from manufacturing, the transportation, and the eventual installation of construction materials. Operational carbon is what has been part of the focus of the discussion about carbon in buildings so far, is what comes from a building's energy consumption, like the heating, the cooling, the lighting needs, those types of things. But with the increase of operational energy efficiency, the impact of embodied carbon emissions in our buildings will become progressively more important. Oh, here's a better slide that illustrates the difference between embodied carbon and operational carbon. This is a very relevant slide. Studies have shown that green buildings are healthier, they perform better, they last longer, they're easier to maintain. And in the long run, owners of green homes in Hawaii save energy, save money, preserve the environment, and help improve the state's economy all at the same time. Incentives to make a shift towards green buildings, green building design, are growing, just as the pressure of the climate change crisis increases. And as practiced, sustainable methods are proven to be not only better for building inhabitants, but are getting more cost-effective over time. If you look at this slide here, you realize that solving climate change truly is the ultimate task of a public-private partnership. None of us can solve this by ourselves. Everybody has a role in this, and only together can we truly accomplish what needs to be accomplished. There's a role for policy. It gives role to the government, as well as nonprofit and grassroots organizations to use action to affect change at various levels. They are the roles and the responsibilities of the professional architecture, engineering, and construction businesses. But the call for architects and the larger industry of construction to design for the greater good in their communities is really not a new concept. Climate change's relationship to social justice and the growing inequalities in the built environment can be addressed in how we construct and use our buildings. The AIA, the American Institute of Architects 2030 Commitment Program, offers architectural firms a network of resources to prioritize a practice of energy performance designs. And the organization states that zero net carbon building standards elevate the practice of architecture, it saves clients money, and it combats the effects of global climate change. There are opportunities for developers. Policy can help to provide guidance to developers looking to build projects within areas of increased exposure to environmental stressors. That has to be a dialogue. An example is sea level rise. Let me see. In the paper is a section where I point out opportunities of the Department of Planning and Permitting. I do want to start out by saying there's already great progress has been made in regards to sea level rise, off-street parking discussions, tree canopy coverage, just to name a couple. So the intent here is to acknowledge the role of DPP in this discussion here. So solutions. Let me see what I have next here. Oh, solutions. There are many, clearly, and I can only touch on a couple here. Buildings with passive, for example, buildings with passive and integrated renewable energy systems will decrease operational costs. Some examples for that might work here in Hawaii. And quite frankly, from the perspective of an architect, a lot of those concepts are simply good design. It's not something that architects started to do now. It is part of good design. How do we use natural lighting? How can we improve ventilation? How can we take advantage of certain site-specific elements? More simple thought-through designs store less heat, allowing houses to cool quickly after the sun sets. These are very, very basic concepts, but they deserve to be refocused on in the times that we're going through. The value of deep overhangs and large surrounding shading trees. I think I have some, yeah. There are concepts that apply to low-rise buildings just as they do to high-rises, and to material selection. One point I'd like to make is that we should look at simply reducing the amount of materials that we are using. Is really every trim necessary? Okay, maybe I got too editorializing here. A great example for the use of material is concrete. Concrete plays a big role here in Hawaii. We have, I'm not sure whether everybody is aware of that, but Hawaii has been leading in the development over history of concrete technology, and we have a lot to be proud of. But green concrete is the concept of sequestering carbon in concrete. It, in short, injects a material that replaces some of the cement that is required for the concrete, while maintaining, or in some instances, actually strengthening or increasing the strength requirements. That decreases the cost of the cement, that embeds a polluter in a new material, and it allows for a reduced carbon footprint. Let's see what the next one is. I touched on this. Okay, now we're getting into a section that I included that is a little bit outside of the actual construction component. Chip Fletcher recommended to look at resilience hubs. So we have components included in that. I think this is, given that we are a commission that looks at resiliency, it is very, very important. It increases the size of this paper though. We have concept of, let me see, what else do I have here? Complete streets. You heard that earlier. And here are, and this is what I'm closing with, the standards that are important to how we do our work. There's local direction. There is there are green building standards. These are often certifications that are given by third-party organizations. There's a 2030 challenge that I mentioned earlier, and there is the zero code. Okay, I know this wasn't as short as I hoped I could do this, but I hope it gave a general overview of what this paper is about, and I would really stop sharing. I would really love to hear some comments and some feedback.
Thank you very much, Bettina. That was a great overview. So starting with the commissioners, I wanted to give us some solid time to give comments and feedback to Bettina. Are there specific comments from commissioners at this point? Rosie.
I just wanted to say I really enjoyed reading I really enjoyed reading it. I enjoyed the graphics. I thought they were extremely helpful. I do have a couple just questions because I'm not an expert in this area. So one thing that I've been reading more about, actually really more having to do with COVID, is the notion that for a long time buildings haven't been designed with ventilation in mind, particularly thinking about and so kind of like in the idea of returning to work and kind of thinking about that. I guess I was wondering when people are kind of designing ventilation, is the thought more towards cooling? Is it like, what is the trade-off? And you know, in terms of thinking and kind of incorporating health issues, right, into climate, how does ventilation and HVAC systems, how can you provide some information about that? Because
Of
yeah.
course, this is super relevant right now, and we have actually clients in every one of our markets talking with us about what can be done. And the solutions are actually a bit different. If you look at healthcare, for example, they have historically, I mean, they're providing clean environments. So historically, their mechanical equipment, like the air conditionings and any kind of ventilation systems, have been filtering any viruses, and so they're providing a cleaner air, if you will. And there's air pressures that help there. This is the first time where we see conversation about how bringing some of those concepts into other building types. But to a large degree, that is cost prohibitive. So we're looking at, or the mechanical engineers are looking at different types of filters now that can help, and you know, that's a work in progress. There are some products there. However, the other point I want to try to make is that it is changing how we design as well. I just dropped my daughter off at school this morning. She is going to school here on the Windward side high school. They had their first day at school. I'd say about half of their curriculum is being taught outside. They have luau tables under big tents, and they all have masks, and they've been told you stay apart. And we're rolling with the punches to a certain degree. Will this stay? Parts of it probably will. I think we will see some of that. And what happens in office environments, for example? Our company, we are 104 people, and we have a completely open design. We don't have a single closed office. And what does that mean to an office like ours? We will not move back to enclosed offices. We will move forward, and instead of adding space, look at how space is managed. So that will change. We are looking at, we have residential clients that look at their designs, and they say, large scale, and they're looking at eliminating bedrooms and creating more flexible spaces that would allow work from home options. So it's what's happening with COVID is touching on almost every aspect of our practice right now. So from a design perspective, it's very exciting.
I mean, I guess I was just wondering how that kind of intersects with trying to be more green as far as construction, and if that will require like major retrofits and that will increase cost. And but yeah, I don't want to take, I don't want to divert the conversation away, but just kind of thinking about how if you're trying to green an industry, but you have such a big problem that might require retrofitting, how does that, how does the cost balances of that, does it balance
Actually,
out something where the technology actually is green? And you know what I mean? That's just a question that I wasn't sure about.
I love that question, and I'm taking it in a totally different direction because I can't speak on details on the mechanical side, because yes, at first glance that is going to be more expensive. But how do we work around this? I believe that with more people working from home, because some of us will continue to work from home, there will be added flexibility. We will keep cars off the road. We will, I mean, have you been on the road lately? There's so much less traffic. You know, will the kids continue to work or not, or learn outside? The science teachers are so excited. They're going into the woods for their classes. It's a little bit bizarre, but I quite frankly love it. So how much of that will stay? So if you're asking, can we add a COVID component to our paper, I'd be very open to that, especially because Chip Fletcher in the past has been pointing out that pandemics are here to stay. And we will make it through this one, but there, as much as I hate to say it, might be another one right coming behind. So what does that mean? Yeah.
Thanks, Rosie, and thanks, Bettina. McKenna, did you have any specific comments?
Yeah, thank you, Bettina. Thanks so much for the presentation. That was like an excellent overview. I enjoyed reading it. And you were kind of fishing for feedback in terms of like overall scope. And so I think that's where I do have some thoughts. I mean, when I read it initially, I felt like it was really broad, right? It's the built environment, not only in terms of how it's constructed, but also the form of the built environment and what that means for activities around it, right? Yep. And then add on to that both the greenhouse gas side and the adaptation side, right?
Yep.
So, you know, I do think that all those things are connected, and so in that sense, if you want to keep the scope that broad, it will work out, right? It'll just be really big to do that justice. So if you are looking for a way to narrow it down, it seemed like from your presentation you were. To me, I think something that this would be really sort of more narrow, targeted, and very, very interesting and add value to this conversation would be to focus on the embodied carbon and the operational carbon. It seemed like that's where it was starting, and then it kind of got bigger. That's just my 2 cents, but as I said, I think there are ways to do it well where you make these connections as well. So
I appreciate that. Okay, good. This is the longest paper we've ever done, and I feel so passionate about this that you know how some people look at it and they say, oh my God, it's 20 pages. Okay, I'm going to read this later, and they never get to it. But they see 2 papers that are 10 pages each, and they say, oh, okay, I can do this. So that's, I mean, it's a very basic, silly, in a way, question. And but you are absolutely right. They are connected. Yes, sorry.
I agree with McKenna on you know, the broadness of your scope and you know, like you yourself said. And I was thinking that, you know, if you do choose, which McKenna said, you know, it seemed like you started with the focus on embodied and operational carbon, a way to keep some of that great information that you know, in the resilience hubs and community work that you get into in the later parts of the guidance document might be to pull them out as examples and put them in a box. So, I mean, then you're really not cutting down on the length, but you are keeping the paper itself tighter And so like taking out the resilience hub and saying, this is an example of a way of applying some of these standards in a way that it could play out in theory that meshes with the city's resilience plan and potential adaptation plan. So it would give people, an example while keeping the body of the paper a little tighter.
I like that. Yep.
And then, so you could do that with one or two things, just one or two boxes with examples, which is something we've dealt with in the other guidance documents. And then lastly, I had a question about the recommendations and considerations section, which is at the very end on page 20 of 21. I see the note there that it's still in progress, and we have, two general recommendations and something for the DPP to be filled in at a later time, maybe once we had more conversation with them. But I was wondering about how specific we want these recommendations to be, that these are very high level, and I could see something like, taking out sentences like, we recommend prioritizing the use of local building materials as, just an example.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I think you got my point. How vague we want it, or how high level versus how specific with ideas you wanted these recommendations to be, and maybe also hearing from Josh in the office about what would be more helpful for them in terms of recommendations.
Before I hand it over to Josh, this is perfect. You're nailing part of my issue, and I apologize because what we sent out was it's not the final version, and we had taken out the reference to DPP simply because I would not want this to be misconstrued as something where we are adding to DPP and DPP's workload, and it's the intent from and expect for them to take a lead in a way. What the intent here is to stress, okay, we're working together on this, just like we've done in the other examples that I mentioned earlier. That's what's important. And that's why I decided to actually take that portion out of here. Or we can leave it in and I work on the wording a little bit more. But the problem here, just like you pointed out, is how specific, how prescriptive in a way do we want to be with the steps suggested. And because the scope is so broad, we really would have to take certain portions and say, okay, here are examples on how we move forward. That would be the only thing we could do. Sorry, Josh.
I'm thinking about our other guidance documents where those sets of recommendations are really what I think the mayor and city council look at. And so if we were to take out, the high level findings and some potential ways of implementation, what would they be and what level would be most helpful for the city? So maybe I'll turn it over to Josh now.
And there are there are some, if you will, low-hanging fruit already. For example, the green concrete. We have that technology here in Hawaii. We are using it on sections of the, I believe it is H2 or H1 over there, the freeway. We have, I believe, at least 2 concrete manufacturers here that have made the required modification to their facility to produce green concrete. Yet we have not built a horizontal structure using green concrete. Our firm has worked with structural engineers on a number of projects with the goal to use green concrete. So the dialogue is happening. We just haven't gotten one out of the ground yet. So if you are looking for a more solid recommendation, one could say, well, let's consider making green concrete a requirement for any type of construction. I know there's some people listening now, and they have probably immediate reaction and say, "Oh my goodness, you haven't thought about X, Y, or Z." So I'm a little bit hesitant to so quickly make this statement, but this is something I personally would feel very good about it. We have that dialogue, like I said, in our firm. I know it has the support of structural engineers around town, and it is a very low-hanging fruit, in my opinion. Okay, sorry, Josh. Now I'm going to put myself on mute.
I saw Chip too. So actually, before we go back to Josh and CCR, let me give Chip an opportunity to comment on the paper. Sorry, Josh, you'll get in there.
Thank you. And Bettina, thanks for acknowledging my role at the beginning, but it really wasn't earned. I read this like 2 months ago and sent you one email. So, but I appreciate that. A couple of comments. I agree it's too long, and it's my suggestions that probably led to that. What is your, or choose your comfort zone, I think, and then go with that and have the title reflect that, because the title is Climate Change and the Construction Industry, which is a massive area. If you want to go with just pure mitigation in construction practices or something like that, and not even building architecture, that'd be great. Whatever your comfort zone is, I think is what you should go towards, and then we'll have plenty of additional white paper opportunities for what is not covered. Secondly, it could use a line editor, someone to go through line by line. And there are some places where there's jargon. For instance, you use the term single wall builds. Obviously you mean single wall construction, but that's jargony. And there are a number of places where a line editor, someone who's familiar with sort of editing documents like this, might improve the reading, the deliverability of it. And
the entertainment, it's the entertainment that comes when you ask somebody to write a paper in their third language.
Well, since you bring up entertainment, I love the phrase thermal delight. And I wasn't quite sure what to do with that, but that was a really good one, to experience thermal delight as well as utilize ecosystem services. So that's one example.
I marked that down too. That was great.
And then practice. I love that phrase.
All right, then leave it in. I also want to point out, this was sent around, I think this is Harrison Rue's work, who was on at the beginning. Maybe he's still on. This is a document
still here.
Called Climate Adaptation, Background Research, International Best Practices, and Local Initiatives. So this came out at the same time that you were working on your white paper. This certainly is relevant, and I think offers an introduction and some guidance to developers in trying to figure out how they're going to build in a landscape that's going to ultimately be flooded. So anyway, those are my comments. Great job. And
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chip. Yeah, I will. Okay, if you want me to say something, I will feel. I would feel better splitting this paper into two, and one specifically construction, and you called it mitigation in construction practices. Not sure if I go with that, but I will go in that direction. And but I did like your feedback, and the the impact that we have on the built environment in the broader sense. I think that is important. I have to go and look at Harrison's paper in more detail, but that is yeah. If you ask me which way I'm leaning, this is the way I'm leaning, and then it's a little bit less big. Okay, terrible wording. Now you make me self-conscious. Okay, Josh, save me.
So I would just, mention from our perspective, obviously, anytime your guys' role as sort of an advisory group around what's the best science around climate change and how to address it through policy, dividing it up between a mitigation approach, how do we emit the least possible carbon through building practices, and then designing buildings to withstand what we know is coming in terms of increased climate impact. Those are two easily separable pieces. And to Vicky's point, Chair Keener's point, to the extent that there are actual policy recommendations, I think that's helpful. That Carbon Cure and the broader industry around having CO2 sequestering concrete is something we've known about. We've actually, tried within the city to see if we could include it in our specs. There was some pushback from the concrete industry because some of the providers don't provide it. And even though it's the same cost and can even, create more strength, there was a sense, well, you'd be favoring specific providers if you asked for this. So having, a policy recommendation from a group like the Climate Change Commission saying, here are the types of products and policies and practices that should be adopted over time, specifically is very helpful, because then, we can look at those and are there ways to wrap them in policy so that we all, bend the arc to zero, which is state law, right? We all know we have to get to zero emissions by 2045 under state law. So we do need everybody helping and bringing their best ideas forward on that, as opposed to saying, well, we don't want to do it just because we don't do it now. And then the final point I'll just say is, the conversation around COVID and climate is one we're obviously engaged in heavily. We are trying to work on a program that would help businesses here retrofit their air conditioning systems and then help pay for that through energy efficiency practices as well. I don't know if it's going to be approved as part of the CARES expenditures that we are doing, but we're working on a proposal right now, because the reality is to essentially mitigate COVID, you want to bring in more air, you want to increase your air handling, and that does tend to increase costs because you're running pumps and you're pushing it through smaller filters and all that. But there's ways to offset the cost with energy efficiency, and that's what we're always trying to do, is make sure that we get better, healthier buildings, whether they're climate or COVID related, but not have costs go up, whether it's housing or COVID retrofits. That's always the aim. Thanks.
Thanks, Josh. Bettina, was that helpful in terms of the level of specificity for the recommendations as we move forward?
That was very helpful. I took a whole bunch of notes. I'm going to take a stab at the paper. I'm feeling very good, actually.
Okay, well, hold on to that feeling, because if there are no more comments from the commission, I'm about to open it up to the public.
Hold on, can I make one more comment?
Oh, yep.
Sorry. Bettina, I just wanted to add one thing. So I liked the discussion of the Architecture 2030 goals or targets, and also the discussion around zero net energy buildings or zero net carbon buildings. And I think that's really important. And I would just kind of layering on that, I think it would also be great to bring in a little more context about Oahu's electricity grid, right? Because just going zero net in a building scale is only so valuable if it's not synced in with the grid system, right?
Yep.
put tons of solar on it, but if it's not helping the grid, it's not that valuable, right? So to the extent that that can sort of be integrated in the broader system context, I think that would be really valuable.
No, this makes sense. Good point.
Thanks,
Right.
McKenna. All right, any more comments from the commission? All right, that being said, I would like to devote about 10 minutes of discussion time on this agenda item with the public, considering that several of us have a hard stop at 11:30 today. Let's see, I see one comment. We'll start with the one in the chat, but if you want to put your name in the chat, if it's easiest, if you have a comment. The first one in the chat is from Joe Ferraro, and he says embodied carbon in existing buildings should be considered now that bricks and mortar retail and parking structures will be decreasing. The buildings could be reused for other purposes. Joe, did you want to elaborate on that or offer any other comments?
Sure. Well, I think it would be great, and Josh has mentioned it, that the city can and the state can provide incentives for us to do that. But we have so much built environment already, and as Bettina points out, most of our buildings here are built out of concrete, which is, we all know, extremely energy use of a lot of energy to produce concrete. So if we can reuse our existing buildings, we ought to be looking at that and providing incentives to do it. Also, we need good benchmarking. What's our carbon use right now, so that we can always look at getting better than what we are now. And other than that, I wish I had the opportunity to read the report, and I thank you for having the public on this call. Thanks again.
I'll send you the report, Joe.
I knew you would.
And thank you for your comment, because you're right. There is no building greener than the one that exists already.
Exactly.
And pointing that out in this paper is important. And I just wrote it down, and I will do that. So I appreciate the comment.
And one other thing too, at AIA Honolulu, we have that group called Design for Risk and Resiliency. And we have a great chat going on. You've probably been involved in that. But one of the things too we ought to be striving for are independent buildings that produce their own energy, plus use their own waste, redevelop their own waste, right? So we could unplug from our sewer system. Buildings would be more independent and therefore environmentally more friendly for the whole community. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Joe. I see next in the chat box, Linda Schatz has raised her hand. She has 2 questions and 2 comments. Linda?
Yeah, hi, thanks for allowing some public comment time. I have a quick question about, with this study, I wanted to understand how this will be used and what is sort of the future steps that will happen after the study is finalized. And then number 2, was the study done or being done in conjunction with input from the construction industry, laborers, the developers on housing, material suppliers and other industries that are affected by the study or do work in that process? And then I do have 2 comments, which is I do think that the study would benefit from an economic impact analysis, because if it is going to recommend some climate policies getting from A to Z to be, zero carbon emissions through the construction industry, we also have to understand what the economic impacts to all the industries are, and potentially there could be some incentives, there could be subsidy programs that help industry along, just like the PV industry, solar industry, where there were state and federal tax credits. Things like that help to get an industry to actually meet the climate goal. And so I think that should be a part of it. And then secondly, I do know that there's been a lot of talk about how the community is involved, this equitableness, and having various stakeholders. I think the stakeholders that deliver housing, that deliver our urban environment, are included from the very beginning from a conceptual standpoint, and everybody conceptually wants climate change. But when you get into the weeds on the details of the how and the why and the logistics of it, I don't know that, I don't feel as a developer, I don't know that I feel I've been brought into that fold. And I think others will say the same, that we need to be part of the nitty gritty of the policy making and the sort of how we're going to do it process. So I'll leave you guys with that.
Thank you, Linda. Those are some good comments. I'll let Bettina respond to kind of some of how the paper was put together in terms of considerations. But in terms of economic analysis, that might be beyond the scope of this document, and might be like a third set of recommendations, because it would require some more analysis. That would not only want to look at the economic impact on the industries involved, but also the economic impact on the city and the communities involved, and the potential money saved or lost by doing or not doing some of these adaptations. Tina, did you want to address any of those issues?
I want to be mindful to the lack of time, so I'm going to keep this really short, Linda, which doesn't mean that it doesn't deserve a longer response. And I'm happy to continue this dialogue. And I know you reached out last week. So this the fact that we are working on this paper has been part of the Climate Change Commission agenda. So it was announced. So I do want to say maybe not everybody has been up to date on what we are doing. There's a website that can keep everybody up to date. Now, the paper, as you heard earlier, is super broad, and it is an accumulation of facts. We tried very hard to stick to those facts, and so there's nothing in here that is that could be controversial, because it is a paper on this is what it is. This is the current situation. I love your question that says, okay, how do we move forward from here? And in many ways, this ties into this one slide that I had with the stakeholders. None of us gets to net zero by ourselves. We have to have the dialogue, and we need a lot of different people that buy into it. And everybody has their own objections. Everybody is an expert in their particular field. So what does it take for us to get together to a carbon-free environment? Okay, sorry, it probably was longer than it should have been. Sorry.
Thank you, Bettina. So next up on the chat questions, we have Harrison Rue, followed by Jacob Zilkowitz. And I see David raising his hand also. So David, you'll be after Jacob.
Sure, thanks, Victoria. Really quickly responding to a little bit, and sorry, I dropped off Zoom, some malfunction, and came back on right when folks were saying we need to talk to DPP later. That was a few minutes ago. So I just want to mention that the document that Josh mentioned is posted on our website at Beauty Honolulu. And that's the research doc, Bettina. It's very similar to yours. We have a second doc coming out, again, very short, and that is we were originally calling it guidance, but we're not even thinking that it's guidance yet. We're calling it urban design principles for climate adaptation. So it's very similar to yours, Bettina, much shorter and simpler. But I would also point to where there's a section in both the research doc that is also summarized in the principles doc that says about a paragraph each of the different things that are going on at the city in terms of future regulations, future thinking about incorporation into building code, incorporation into site development codes. We're not ready for any of that. So this guidance doc is really just everybody's collective best thinking about different options for adapting to climate right now. So we'd be glad, it should be out within a couple of weeks. We'd be glad to come and present that to the commission, or just make sure you have the link to it.
That's awesome. Thank you very much, Harrison. I look forward to reading that.
Thanks, Harrison. Jacob?
Hello. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Jacob Zielkiewicz. I'm a member of the public based in Kailua, and I'm just commenting as an interested and concerned citizen. So congratulations on the publication of the white paper and having the discussion of climate change impacts from the construction industry. I think it's great that you're having this discussion and framing a part of it around embodied carbon and carbon emissions associated from building operations. I had a question about a target, and specifically, is there a carbon reduction target for the construction industry other than the statewide 2045 target? And if not, then perhaps consideration could be given to incorporate a target for this sector as the commission advises and makes recommendations in the context of this white paper. In terms of the cost considerations and economic impacts, so this came up in the previous with the previous comment. And I think one of the commissioner's previous questions about potentially higher costs associated with green concrete. And I think there's an opportunity here to also consider some of the externalities or costs that typically aren't considered in cost calculation. So avoided emergency room visits, social cost of carbon, some of these other principles that generally aren't considered in cost calculations. I mean, at the end of the day, we all pay as a society for these impacts. And so I think it's important to start really considering these costs and cost calculations. And I mean, I think there's also something to say about, the potential impacts on jobs, on industry, and other economic impacts. And, I appreciate from the commissioner's previous comment that this is likely to occur in a, subsequent study. And lastly, best practices. So in the paper, you mentioned the green concrete technology being used in Hawaii. I think that's fantastic. And I think that leadership should continue to be highlighted and flagged. And in addition to the green building standards mentioned, I think there's also an opportunity to look at best practices, or practices rather, in other jurisdictions to help formulate the recommendation. And so specifically, be it updates to building codes. I know there's a recently adopted building code requirement in Marin County in Northern California, be it incentive programs that are being piloted or implemented elsewhere, and so forth. I really think some of those examples could help flesh out the recommendations a bit more. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is great feedback, and the examples on what is being done outside of Hawaii. I'm actually familiar with the Marin County one. They didn't make it in because I had to draw the line somewhere. Given this discussion that we're having here, I am very tempted to find a spot for it, and maybe following Vicky's suggestion of the boxes. So this is great. And then only one very quick, I know we're running out of time, one very quick response to your question on what the construction industry, whether the construction industry has a goal. The design industry, through this Architecture 2030 program that I mentioned, has a goal of achieving carbon neutrality by 2030. And they have outlined how to get there. I will, in the next draft of this paper, go more into the details of how that might look like for us. Yeah, very good feedback. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. And David Arakawa is next.
Hi, Ms. Chair. Thank you very much. And Bettina, thank you very much for your hard work on this paper. It's a great first step, and we look forward to working with you and the Climate Change Commission and Josh's office on the issues in this paper. The second issue, I have 7 issues. I'm going to go through it really quickly. We support the purpose of this paper, and you explained it to educate, to to provide opportunities, and that is to identify opportunities. And your intent was not that it be prescriptive. So that's an important thing at this point. It's a discussion piece for all the stakeholders. The third issue is we love the slide. Absolutely love your slide on stakeholders. We need to work together. We are climate change embracers, not climate change deniers. And everybody has to work on that. But we are very troubled by what Harrison just talked about, this DPP document that's going to come out in 2 weeks, that to my knowledge, the stakeholders that actually build things and the other stakeholders from major industries, agriculture, tourism, etc., have not seen this document yet. So we'd be contacting Harrison on that, and we would love for the support of the Climate Change Commission to encourage the city departments to reach out to affected stakeholders, because it's not only the industries, it is the people that the industries serve, it is low-income communities, senior citizens, etc. And many recommendations could be regressive, meaning it impacts poor people more than it impacts rich people. The fourth point is perhaps on the issue of green concrete, the low-hanging fruit. We actually oppose that bill, and it's because our understanding was that it would make one company rich in Hawaii and all the rest not. But based on your further explanation, we would look forward to training or seminars, working with you on training and seminars on both of the issues that were mentioned. Your issue on the green concrete, I think talking to the industry and having a seminar and explaining how that works. And also the thing that Josh brought up about, well, actually one of the commissioners brought it up about retrofitting air conditioning, and Josh talked about it. If we could work on that, those 2 issues, if they are low-hanging fruit, and work with the industry to show the industry that these can be implemented in a cost-effective manner, and work with them. And the 5th issue is what I've been arguing for the past few times I've come here, the economic impact statement, the impact on the home buyers, or the impact on the public. And maybe now's the time to do it. You folks are a data-based, or you folks rely on data to do things. So it would be good if we could find some organization, maybe it's UHERO or whatever, to assist you folks to look at the data of some of the recommendations. The 6th point was brought up by Joe Ferraro on incentives. And like we mentioned before on Bill 25, we need to find incentives so that regular people, low-income people, and developers of housing can find incentives to work on some of the low-hanging fruit or things you're talking about. Last point, number 7, I'm a member of a number of public boards and commissions, and we use permitted interaction groups. So we would strongly recommend that the Climate Change Commission create a permitted interaction group. Sometimes they call it PIG on this issue. It's very important, and it's one of the pathways for renewable energy. And it's, maybe about once or twice a year, LERF agrees with the Sierra Club and Dave Rainey and the Sierra Club, and we agree on public input. So the permitted interaction group will allow more public input. So we would strongly recommend that this issue be, and other issues, and maybe broader issues, you create just a public interaction group. Sorry, those are the 7 issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I wrote them down, and really appreciate the feedback. Thank you, David.
Thank you, David. I know we had talked, we've had lots of discussions about creating the permitted interaction groups, and maybe Wynn, if she's still on here, could Courtney could summarize kind of the overall framework for the creating the interaction groups and how they might play with our very small commission.
Sure. So this is, oh, hello?
Oh, thanks, Courtney.
Okay, sure. So Courtney Suwako, Deputy Corporation Counsel. I advise the Climate Change Commission on legal matters. So just to remind the Commission and also the members of the public, HRS Chapter 92-2.5A does allow 2 members of the board to discuss things between themselves. That is a permitted interaction, just so long as they do not take any commitment to vote or they do not constitute a quorum of the board. So the quorum of the board is also the important thing. As we all know, we have a very small commission here, 5 members. You reach quorum at 3. So the permitted interaction group is under 92-2.5 subsection B. And basically it allows the commission or any other commission that this chapter applies to create a group of 2 or more members of the board, but it has to be less than the number of members which would constitute quorum. So if it's 2 or more members, you kind of, you hit quorum at 3, so you can't have any more than 2 if you wanted to create a PIG. But basically the PIG would be assigned to investigate specific matters. The scope of that investigation has to be defined ahead of time at a meeting of the board, and then you present results afterwards. And you can't have any deliberation or decision-making happening within the PIG. It would have to happen in accordance with the Sunshine Law before a duly noticed meeting of the board. So I think we've discussed the practical implications of the commission forming a PIG before. It's just very limited because you can only have, for this particular commission, you can only have 2 members. So that's the law, and I of course defer to the commission on their decision as to whether they want to form a PIG or not.
And Courtney, I think I was formerly Corp Counsel, and that
yes,
that is from the commission's view on what it takes and Corp Counsel's view on what it takes to form a PIG. Now, does Corp Counsel have a policy or any information on the broad issue of allowing public input and public information? What's the best way of getting public input and public information? Because right now, the PIG might be the best way, right? So,
well, David, I think you know that the Corporation Counsel does not opine on policy matters, so I defer to the commission on that, as that appears to be a policy matter.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that your opinion has nothing to do with allowing public input and public information, right?
Mr. Arakawa, one of the ways that we've been choosing to deal with that because of the small nature of the commission and the PIGs would be limited to 2 commissioners is by this being the public meeting and the fact that these meetings accept public testimony, both written or oral, ahead of time. So, by submitting that, you are, by submitting that testimony either ahead of time or in these circumstances, you are contributing to modifying these posted documents and guidances.
These are huge issues. And using the fact that a PIG would have only 2 members is so Trump-like, I cannot even describe it, right? Limiting public input and limiting the right to have a public interaction group. But you know what? If that's the will of the commission, that's the will of the commission. We can challenge it.
So just to be clear, Mr. Arakawa, I don't think what Commissioner Keener is saying is that things will be limited or that not creation of a PIG is based on or will lead to limitation of public input. Just to make things clear, what the commission is doing by having a publicly noticed meeting, duly noticed under the Sunshine Law, that is the public's opportunity to submit testimony. And you are more than welcome, as Commissioner Keener has said, to submit your testimony ahead of time or to appear during the meetings as you are doing right now. And that goes for any other member of the public.
Yeah, many of these guidance documents are not created in a vacuum either. You know, we're looking at lots of viewpoints and different stakeholders being consulted as we put them together, and they are iterative as we learn about different groups that should be represented and different points of views that should be included in the guidance documents.
So would the commission put on the agenda for next meeting whether to create a PIG or not on climate change issues, including this? Or are you making a decision right now not to do a permitted interaction group?
I think that I need to learn more about exactly what that would look like that's different from what we're doing now. So that would be something that we'd have to talk about with Courtney and the council and the rest of the commission to determine if, you know, what the difference would really be, because I'm not sure I understand exactly what it would be at this point.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Are there other questions from the public? I'm looking in the chat box. Another comment from Linda Schatz about the social cost implications of not providing housing. If costs go up, we can't pencil our projects for moderate and low income peoples. Please consider those are less fortunate than us who need housing. And we need to be very careful in how we approach all this. Definitely agree with that, Linda. Thank you. Unless there aren't any other public comments, I would recommend that we go on to our next agenda item. I don't see anything popping up. Okay, so with that, let's go on to our next agenda item, which is public input for matters not on the agenda. Commissioners, was there any input that you wanted to add? I know that one of the things that was getting tossed around was whether we wanted to put Bill 65 on the agenda for next time. Does anybody have an opinion? Chip, Rosie, Bettina, McKenna? Thumbs up or thumbs down to look at Bill 65 on the agenda?
What status will it be in, say, a month from now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I know it's, Wynn, do you know by our next meeting what status Bill 65 will be in?
I can probably answer that.
For Josh?
This is Josh. Yeah, the next hearing for Bill 65 is in the Budget Committee hearing on October 21st, we expect. Obviously, it hasn't been noticed yet. We don't know, but that's where the next stop would be, should it be basically brought back to the same committee where it was held at the last meeting. So that would be the next date that it would possibly be held if you're looking at dates in terms of the commission. And we are sort of happy to do a briefing on the bill if the commission would like. And I would just like to very quickly remind everyone on the call, the Charter Commission tasked the climate change, or the charter of the city tasked the Climate Change Commission with making recommendations and policy recommendations to the mayor and others, city council and department heads. I think Mr. Arakawa had sort of stated that our office would somehow be involved in taking or working with those groups, the groups he's mentioning, to incorporate in the white paper. We don't have anything, any role in that. So if the commission, wants to take public testimony and incorporate that, but I just want to make sure that folks know that if they send stuff to us, we can pass it on to the commission, but we don't inform the commission's work product. Thanks.
So when is our next scheduled Climate Change Commission meeting? Is it before October 21st?
It's after October, it's on October 26th. So you have a opportunity to present at the following committee or full council meeting if it passes the budget meeting.
Okay. Okay, so maybe that could be a potential agenda item then. Hearing about how that goes. Were there other comments from the public on items not on the agenda? All right, I looked around. I don't see any hands or notes in the chat. So I'm going to go on to our tentative next meeting date, which we just announced also, which is on October 26th. And what time is that at? Sorry.
9:30.
9:30.
9:30.
And it will continue to be a virtual meeting on the Zoom platform.
Are you taking agenda items?
Yeah, we were, that can go here in the announcements or whenever you'd like.
Well, the governor signed Senate Bill 2060 last week, and it contains some major revisions to 205A, the CZM law. And it would be great to get someone perhaps from the CZM program to explain what the new 205A will look like. What were the changes that were made? Now, it's not pertaining to any particular white paper, so it doesn't necessarily need to be next month. But there were a number of changes made, and it'd be great to have an explanation of those. So have someone sort of walk us through item by item what's new.
Thanks, Chip. Are there any other agenda items for next month that commissioners wanted to bring up? Okay, so we have a couple possibilities. And still on item 10, are there any other announcements, both from commissioners or from the public? Things coming up to look out for this next month, items of interest? David, is that a hand?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Commissioner Fletcher, you first, or?
No, I was saying that David had his hand up.
Okay. Yeah, you know, I already talked about the formation of a permitted interaction group, if possible, to be on the agenda. The second thing is, I think the housing industry and stakeholders would be interested in making a presentation to the commission on how the industry helped improve sustainability and renewable energy issues in Bill 2. So Bill 2 was amended and was passed, but I think it would be very interesting for the developers to present how Bill 2 was amended to make it more renewable energy friendly. So so perhaps and that's no rush on that, you know, could do it next meeting or the meeting following that, but it would be very interesting to hear the amendments that were made by the electric company, the home builders, and the Automobile Dealers Association to charge more cars, to charge way more cars and way more low-income cars, or cars owned by low-income families, EVs owned by low-income families. And that was the proposal by the combination of Hawaiian Electric Company, automobile dealers, and the home builders. So that would probably be interesting and be an example of PPP, a public-private partnership, and people working together to further the interests of, you know, of this commission, the issues that are presented to this commission. So it's a good example, and hopefully we can work with Bettina on her construction document also. So that would be a good example. Thank you, Ms. Chair. Thank you.
Mr. Arakawa, I think you're referring to Bill 25, not Bill 2, with regard to this matter.
Yes, Bill 25. I'm sorry.
And thanks for that, Mr. Arakawa. And are you also suggesting that you would be that person to give the update, or that there's somebody that is that would be a better place to give that summary?
Yes, I think it's better. There probably are 2 or 3 other people that are better able to present that to you folks. So if you're interested, just email me and I'll email the commission, and I can forward the names of those speakers, the people who actually put together the table. So I was involved in the idea, but the specifics are more detailed. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other announcements?
Can I make a quick announcement, please? I want to thank Leila for reminding me, because otherwise I would have forgotten. But for those of you that are interested, tomorrow, September 22nd at 4:30 local time, there is a UN panel titled Regenerative Global Futures for a Thriving Panel, a discussion with Hawaii's thought leaders. That is a global stage for Hawaii, a wonderful opportunity. And I hope that despite the short notice, you're able to attend. The panel is moderated by Amanda Ellis. She is in the Institute of Sustainability and Innovation of ASU. The panelists are Dwayne Corizo, the founder and chairman of IEO. It is Dr. Kamana Opono Krabe, formerly with OHA, although he might not want me to say that, CEO of the Kohala Institute now. It is our very own Leila Kilolu, policy analyst, and it is Lauren Ross Venu, the founder of 3R Water, Kalani Ka'ana'ana, the director of Hawaiian Cultural Affairs and Natural Resources for the Hawaii Tourism Authority, and yours truly representing our industry. So I hope.
Yes,
yeah,
and
go ahead.
yes, thank you, Bettina. And I wanted to add that in speaking about the Climate Change Commission's work, what I wanted to do was to showcase the wonderful work that the Commission has done in terms of the publications, such as the Shoreline Setback Guidance Document, the Climate Change and Financial Risk paper, and I'm sure Bettina will talk about the paper that we're currently working on, and it's really to help the private sector think about climate change and the big picture, and how the public and the private sectors can synergize and work together. I will also acknowledge that I'm not a city employee, because I think that's really important, that I'm a PhD student at UH and supporting the Commission. Thank you.
Is there a website? Is there a website for that talk, and can you put it on the chat?
Leila, can you do that, please?
Yes, I will go ahead and do that right now.
And can it also be posted to the Facebook page for, so more broader audience might want to be involved?
We were told not to share it on social media because, but I can at least share it here on the chat. So.
Thank you. Sorry.
No worries at all.
Thanks for doing this, Leila. I don't have the updated. I think this is longer. I think it's from 4:30 to 6, and I think there's some information on my site that was changed. So I want to make sure that all of that's updated, but I haven't seen that yet. But it's awesome. Hawaii will have a wonderful spotlight, and I'm looking forward, and I'm quite humbled to be part of that.
Thanks, Bettina, and thanks, Layla. I look forward to it tomorrow. With that, we are coming right up on 11:30. And I can't remember, do I need to motion to adjourn? One day
No,
I'll get the hang of
we
this.
discussed all of the items, so you do not need to motion to end the meeting.
Okay, so we've gotten through all of the items, so the meeting is adjourned.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Have a good